So, no, I wouldn't say I have a passion for HR.
Welcome back to Human Resources for the People. It's a human capital revolution. Today we're going to be talking about terminating someone in the Philippines. Of course, just to set the scenes, the Philippines is in Southeast Asia. It's part of ASEAN. It is an island country or mini islands country. So let's get into it. It has obviously a colonial background, but it's Spanish colonial, and I think that at times that affects a lot of its labor laws. Meaning the Spanish in many ways did not have as much impact on the labor laws, I don't feel like, compared to some of the former English subjects. So, getting started right off, in the Philippines, you do need to terminate for cause. And just cause is defined as the following: serious misconduct, gross and habitual neglect, fraud or willful breach, commission of a crime, and other similar things. I think that that's pretty interesting. I mean, just cause is required for most terminations throughout the world, except for the United States. But, I think that, or at least in practice, in law rather, uh, but I do think that it's a little bit interesting that, for example, neglect by the employee of their duties is involved in that. That's good, but I'm concerned whether or not that what that actually looks like. I'd love to hear what that looks like in practice. You can, of course, terminate as a result of change in business conditions or as well as illnesses of an employee. So if there's a closing of operations or layoffs, redundancies, etc., you can terminate for that reason as well, as authorized by Articles 298 and 299. So I think that that's very basic, but it's very basic, but it's good that it's actually articulated in law. I think the interesting one that a lot of European countries they have this problem with labor-saving devices, and you're also seeing that with the SAG-AFTRA strike that's currently going on. But if there's an installation of a labor-saving device, which, at least they're not Luddites, right? Then the Philippine employers can lay off or terminate. You can also terminate in the case of an illegal strike by union officers, which is, again, I mean, it is illegal. It's what we call in America, we call it a wildcat strike. You can terminate in cases when that happens. Don't know how I feel like that. For one, I don't believe that there should be a thing as illegal or legal strikes. But beyond that, I think that it is terminating for that makes sense if you're saying that termination in the commission of as a result of a commission of a crime also makes sense. You do have to give notice before dismissal if you're terminating for just cause, and you have to go through what they call due process, but what we would call progressive discipline. What Americans would call progressive discipline. The employee has to be notified at least 1 month before the effective date, but for probationary employees on the grounds of failure to qualify as a regular employee, you can just give them a written notice within a reasonable time frame. And I wanted to highlight this. I have seen in the past discussions surrounding, for example, a person leaving one job, taking another, and then failing in the first 2 months or so at their new job, and being upset and people saying things such as, "Well, this only happens in America." Actually, no, that is a fairly common thing throughout the world with respect to probationary time. Many people are terminated before their probation, and you have to understand why. If you have to jump through these hoops to terminate an employee, you want to make sure that it's the right one, right? You don't want to lock yourself into someone for a very long time. And with respect to labor law throughout the world, except for the United States, you may end up not being able to fire them, or having to take a significant amount of time to fire them. So in these countries, it's more likely to be terminated, early on in your probationary period. And I would actually argue that it's less likely to be terminated in your probationary period in the United States than in many of these countries for this reason. You don't have to give notice at all if they're fixed term employees where there's a specific term laid out in their contract, or if they're project employees who, their employment is automatically termed at the end of the project, which makes sense. I mean, these are common sense labor laws, in my opinion. For layoffs, they actually have something that's pretty common throughout the world, not common in the United States. But if there's a redundancy, the severance pay is 1 month of pay for every year of service. I'm curious if there's a cap on that. I'd have to do more research to see if, there's some sort of limit to that because that could be significant. But it does obviously encourage businesses to keep more senior employees and lay off the lower seniority. That's that could be a problem, right? I mean, seniority does not actually determine whether or not you're good at your job or productive or efficient. You could be, you could not be, and it's sort of a mixed bag. But it would absolutely cost more to terminate long-term employees. Um, and so I think that that is again common throughout the world. A lot of places use a 1 month per 1 year with some sort of cap, some sort of limit. But I just find that it could, cause a significant amount of problems within the economy. In order to dismiss an employee, it's the same process kind of in the United States. We're not required to follow this, but it's good HR practice. It's HR best practice to follow progressive discipline, and that's what they do in the Philippines. They get a first written warning indicating the specific grounds, and then they should get a second written notice, etc. And that's pretty basic. If the termination is for authorized causes under the labor code, they have to give a written notice to the employee at least 1 month before the intended date of dismissal. Employees are protected from dismissal under the right of security of tenure as enshrined in the Constitution. We'll look at that real quick because I like their Constitution and how it reads, specifically surrounding labor. So in the Constitution, it reads, quote, "It shall guarantee the rights of all workers to self-organization, collective bargaining and negotiations, and peaceful concerted activity, including the right to strike in accordance with law. They shall be entitled to security of tenure, humane conditions of work, and a living wage. They shall also participate in policy and decision-making processes affecting their rights and benefits as may be provided by law." And for example, in the worker unions in the trade unions in Germany and Northern Europe, you see a lot of that decision making in the processes. You don't see that very often, I feel like, in other countries, and so I'm curious to see what it's like in your country. What do you experience when you see that? Because I don't know if the labor unions have a lot of say so elsewhere outside of like Northern Europe, and some communist countries. The labor code does provide for a mandatory retirement age at 65 years old, um, which is, well, it matches the general retirement age in the United States, but there is no mandatory retirement age in the United States except for specific industries. And that's what they do here. Underground mining employees, the mandatory retirement age is 60 years of age, which I understand the concept. We would consider it discrimination, I think, but I'm sure it's in order to protect these employees. Well, let me know what you think in the comments down below. I do this series pretty frequently, often 2 times a week, where I assess the hiring and firing in various countries around the world and compare them to the United States. Let me know what you see in your country, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye, guys.